highway at 0317 reminds me of a morgue's hallway. Too clean, too bright, and somehow smelling of old regrets, even when the desert air should be scentless. 12 years driving this Phoenix to Tucson graveyard shift has taught me that silence can scream, neon can bleed, and loneliness has fingerprints it leaves on every window. Tonight, the silence howls louder than usual, crawls into the vents and settles in my lungs like fine desert dust. The Greyhound's engine drones its tired hymn while the AC coughs out lukewarm promises. Fluorescent lights up top flicker, strobe lighting the cabin so the passengers look like frames from a broken film reel. My hands go through the ritual. Mirror check, air pressure glance, throttle feather just under 65. Body memory so old it's practically bone. The rest of me drifts, observing without feeling, because feeling is an occupational hazard. I retired from years ago. We board in Phoenix. A teenage girl with half-healed track marks asks if I'll wake her at the Tucson terminal. She says it like she's asking me to keep a secret. An elderly vet trembles as he digs for crumpled singles, the tremor traveling from his fingers to my spine. A woman in a decades-old business suit clutches a briefcase like it's a flotation device on a sinking ship. Same ghosts, different night. Then he steps on. 40-something, maybe younger if grief ages a man in dog years. Jeans and a flannel shirt laundered into surrender. Brown hair thinning like winter grass. Posture careful. As though if he bends the wrong way, the world might notice him. But his eyes, Christ, his eyes break the pattern. They're too bright, too alert. Scanning me in an instant the way a cornered animal sizes up a hunter. Can you kill me, will you? He carries a leather satchel older than my bus. War-torn edges, brass buckles dulled by sweat, scars crisscrossing the hide like a map of wrong turns. He hugs it to his ribs, thumb stroking the handle as if reassuring a child. I'm here, I'm here. When he hands over the ticket, our fingers touch, and I feel tension vibrate through him, a live wire disguised as flesh. Row 3, window seat left side. He sits bolt upright, bag on his chest, eyes aimed at the night beyond tempered glass where only blackness stares back. No phone, no earbuds, no twitchy leg, just stillness. The kind you find in chapels and crime scenes. I pull away from the terminal. Sodium lights fade. The city exhales us, and the snore in dark yawns wide. 10 minutes in, passengers settle. Addict girl curls fetal. Vet's chin drops to his dog tags. Businesswoman scribbles numbers that look like apologies onto a legal pad. All normal. Yet my rear view keeps drifting to row 3. The man hasn't blinked. People say cynicism toughens you. Lie. It's scar tissue over soft spots you pretend don't ache. I watch humanity at its Oros 3 worst. Fugitives from heartbreak, tourists of failure, pilgrims of regret. Usually I keep a safe distance behind the wheel. Tonight, the distance feels like a rumor. 40 minutes out, asphalt unspools beneath our headlights, a gray ribbon slicing moonscape. Haboob ghosts dance at the shoulders, stirred by passing semis. Air in the cabin grows syrupy, like humidity made of secrets. I cough, pop open my thermos, pretend coffee will ground me. It doesn't. Row 3 exhales. First movement in forever. He shifts the satchel so the brass catch faces upward, one finger resting on it like a trigger guard. A bead of sweat slides from his temple to jaw, glistening in intermittent cabin light, yet he never wipes it away. The drop hangs, then falls, darkening denim where it lands. I know a man guarding contraband when I see one. Drugs, cash, gun, none fit. Too much reverence in his grip, too much sorrow in his shoulders. Mile marker 211 glides past. I downshift for a hill. Engine whines, passengers sway. The satchel man doesn't sway, he braces, as if protecting fragile cargo. Eyes find mine in the mirror for one bare second, and I flinch because there's a plea wedged inside that stare, pleading for, what? Permission to brake? When the moment passes, my chest feels hollowed like a church after congregation leaves. I clear my throat and flick on talk radio, sports banter, but commentators' laughter sounds obscene against the hush. I kill the volume, surrendering to road hum in my own pulse. Desert night compresses vision into tunnel. Every oncoming headlight floats like a distant lighthouse, then winks out, leaving after images that burn the retina. I'm used to that optical loneliness. What I'm not used to is the passenger who refuses to blink. At mile 198, the bus hits a tar snake, tires thump, and the vet jerks awake with a soft curse. Satchel Man's head snaps toward sound like a guard dog. He relaxes only when he sees no threat. Yet his right hand pats the bag, soothing it, or maybe soothing himself. My cynic brain writes a file. PTSD, maybe smuggling ashes of a loved one, maybe both. But another part, the part that still believes broken things can be mended, whispers, he's carrying a story, not a crime. Stories weigh more. 20 minutes later, the addict girl stumbles forward, needing the restroom. As she passes row 3, the satchel man inhales sharp, eyes dilating. She doesn't notice. She's staring at the floor, counting steps like each tile might explode. He watches her disappear behind the folding door, then continues watching, timing her absence. When she returns, he finally exhales. I feel the let-off of pressure in my own ribcage. That's when I know. This isn't about contraband. It's about protection. From world, from self, from memories that stalk you in daylight and devour you at night. An hour in, civilization fades entirely. No service stations, no billboards promising lottery salvation. Only saguaros casting moonlit crucifix shadows on sand. My dashboard clock flips to 0437. I have a rule. At 0437, you either find forgiveness or damnation. Nothing in between lives at that hour. I glance again. Row 3 leans his head against the window now, eyelids lowered but not shut. Reflection of cabin lights skates over glass, framing his face like a portrait already half haunted. Satchel rests in his lap. In that instant, I see him not as a stranger, but as every father who's ever ridden my bus after losing the script for how to save his kid. The realization lands like a blow. I think of my own daughter, back when she was 10 and still let me braid her hair. Haven't seen her in 2 years. My stomach knots, hands tighten on the wheel, bus drifts, rumble strip growls and snaps me back. I correct, adrenaline flashing. Passengers jolt, but don't wake. Row 3 opens his eyes, meets mine. For a fragment of time, I believe, he sees into my private ache and nods. Me too. The road swallows, miles pass, and I begin to craft a silent oath. If he brakes, if he needs help, I'll step out of the driver cage and be human for once. At mile 189, a shooting star burns overhead, long and green, slicing Orion's belt. Cabin lights flutter at the same moment. Coincidence or cosmic pulse? Passengers stir. Businesswoman murmurs in dream. Satchel Man remains statue still, but his fingers drum an anxious rhythm on worn leather. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps, pause. 3 taps. Morse for SOS. Probably coincidence. Road makes conspiracists of us all. The desert at night strips souls to bare wire, then plays them like cheap guitars. I feel its call now, a low-frequency hum vibrating up through the chassis into my bones. Every few minutes I catch myself holding breath, releasing only when tachometer needle dips on a hill. Vital signs of machine and man sinking like twin hearts. Row 3 adjusts posture. For him, a seismic event. He settles bag against chest, plants feet wide, and executes a breath so deliberate it looks rehearsed. I recognize the ritual, the kind you perform before confession or execution, sometimes both. 70 miles to Tucson, road curves, and outside the window the moon rides shotgun beside us, its pale face cratered like memories you'd pay good money to erase. My eyes keep flicking from asphalt to mirror, mirror to satchel. I imagine it ticking, not bomb ticking, but heartbeat ticking, a countdown of decisions postponed too long. I start talking inside my skull, narrating as if distance will publish my thoughts. He must have been a decent man once. Flannel washed to threadbare softness by countless domestic Saturdays. Satchel probably carried report cards and juice boxes back when life was small enough to fit in school corridors. Something happened. Something fanged. And now the satchel holds evidence, or penance, or both. Engine drones, hypnotic. The vet mutters names, maybe platoon buddies, maybe sins. Businesswoman's pen clatters to floor, she doesn't wake. Addiction girl rocks gently, lips moving like she's bargaining with ghosts. We're a mobile monastery of lost prayers. My throat tightens around words I'll never say. Years of practiced detachment suddenly feel like a cheap coat that doesn't fit. I imagine stepping on the brakes, standing an aisle, announcing, "I know some of you carry hurts that outweigh your bags. Tonight the toll is waived. Drop them here. Let the desert keep them." Ridiculous fantasy. But the vigil continues. Row 3's gaze drifts to ceiling, to floor, to aisle. He's cataloging exits the way drowning men scan for ladders. I match his breathing unconsciously. Inhale 4, hold, exhale 6. Old trick my shrink taught me back before I quit therapy because cynicism was cheaper. Cabin air cools. Thermostat reading says 70 degree, but skin claims 60. Might just be nerves. Above dashboard, a Polaroid of my daughter, age 8, Nike's untied, gap-toothed grin, smiles judgment. I flip it face down. Row 3 sees, eyebrows flick. Solidarity of ashamed fathers. At mile 176, the satchel man stands. Not like a regular passenger standing. No sway, no stretch, no excuse me shuffle. He rises straight, shoulders squared under invisible pack, eyes locked on me. Whole bus tilts around his gravity. I grip the wheel. "You good, partner?" Heart drums in ears, voice calm by miracle. He nods once, just once, then steps into aisle, left hand tightening on bag strap. Every head remains bowed in sleep, but I swear cabin lights dim in deference. He walks forward and the floor creaks a confession with each footfall. 8 paces to driver bulkhead. He stops exactly 2 feet behind my chair. I feel his breath on my collar even with engine roar. Words hitch in his throat, audible like gravel in a tin cup. "Driver," he says, voice threaded with rust. He stalls, swallows. "Need a favor." That's all. 2 beats of silence later, he hands the satchel over the barrier, extending it like an offering to a reluctant deity. Contact electrifies my palms, leather warm, heavier than appearance. My pulse gallops. I nurse the wheel with one hand, accept the satchel with the other. Smell hits first, iron, old rain, undertone of library dust. Closer now, I see dark stains around the spine of what looks like a book inside. Adrenaline spikes. What's in here, friend? His eyes shimmer in mirror. Something that can't ride with me anymore. A pause that tastes like gunmetal. Get it to Tucson. Mailbox place on South Stone, box 247. Then forget it. I want to say a dozen things. Policy forbids untagged packages. I could lose my job. Cops could arrest me. You could be handing me a felony. Instead, what exits is, you sure? He nods again, a man feeding himself to fate. Then he reaches overhead, yanks the stop cord. The chime slices the hush, and I swear every sleeper flinches. We're middle of nowhere, I warn. Nothing for miles. There's enough, he murmurs. Hand brushes the satchel one last stroke, almost a goodbye, then he steps back. I ease the bus onto gravel's shoulder, hazards blinking Morse into night. Danger, pray, danger. Doors hiss open, cold desert air knifes inside, carrying creosote and starlight. He descends silently, boots crunch, and walks into sagebrush until shadows swallow him. No glance back. I sit there, engine idling, heart doing double time. Inside my lap sleeps the satchel, breathing for its departed owner. Behind me, the bus resettles, snore, cough, sigh, as though universe just edited one line of its script and kept rolling. 30 seconds, 60. I close doors, grind gears, pull onto asphalt. Road accepts us like nothing happened. But everything happened. Halfway through Act 2, and already my cynic's armor feels dented. Satchel weighs a universe. Ahead, the horizon aches with pending dawn no one asked for. Miles 176 through 143. I carry the satchel like a live coal. The weight redistributes itself constantly, now pressing heavy against my thigh, now featherlight like it might float away if I don't anchor it. My hands sweat against the wheel. Every few minutes I wipe palms on denim and grip again, knuckles aching from tension I can't release. The desert spreads infinite, an ocean of darkness punctured by distant mountains that rise like sleeping gods. Radio static whispers between stations, fragments of late-night talk shows, Spanish ballads about heartbreak, evangelical preachers promising salvation for the cost of a phone call. I cycle through them all, searching for something to drown the silence growing thick as morning fog. But silence wins. It always does out here. I think about the passengers I've carried over 12 years, each one a chapter in America's book of displacement. The runaway kids with black eyes and stories that started with my stepfather or my mother's boyfriend. The elderly riding toward children who stopped calling years ago. The veterans whose nightmares leaked out in sleep, filling the bus with phantom screams from wars that never really ended. Every one of them carried invisible cargo heavier than luggage. Guilt, shame, regret, hope, hanging by threads so thin you needed microscopes to see them. I learned to recognize the weight in how they sat. Too straight meant they were holding something sharp. Too slumped meant they'd given up fighting gravity. The man who handed me this satchel sat straight for 176 miles. Now I understand why. Inside the bag, something shifts when we hit a pothole. Not the rattle of loose objects, but the whisper of papers, the soft thunk of something substantial wrapped in cloth. My imagination conjures possibilities. Love letters never sent, photographs of better times, legal documents that could destroy or redeem. The smell of old blood suggests something darker, evidence maybe, proof of a crime. A confession written in iron and desperation. Mile 159. The highway curves through a narrow pass where ancient lava flows created walls on both sides. Headlights carve tunnels through rock faces that remember volcanic fury from millennia past. For 90 seconds we travel through this geological memory, and I feel the weight of deep time pressing down. Whatever tragedy brought that satchel into existence, it's just another grain of sand in the desert's hourglass. But grief doesn't recognize geological perspective. To the man who walked into darkness carrying nothing but flannel and resignation, his pain was the center of the universe, the gravity well around which every star orbited. I know because I've felt that gravity. My daughter Emma would be 22 now, if she's still alive. Haven't spoken to her since the divorce, when she chose her mother's version of reality over mine. Sometimes I catch myself scanning passengers' faces, looking for her ghost in every young woman who climbs aboard with hollow eyes and careful posture. The rational part knows Emma is probably fine, married maybe, or in graduate school, building a life I'll never see. The father part, the part that remembers bandaging scraped knees and reading bedtime stories, that part still waits for the phone to ring with her voice asking me to come home. The satchel seems to pulse with its own heartbeat. I check the rear view. Teenage girl sleeps curled against window, track marks on her arms like a roadmap of wrong turns. Elderly vet's head tilts back, mouth open, dreaming dreams I hope are kinder than his waking memories. Businesswoman's pen lies fallen across legal pad covered with numbers that look like prayers, mortgage calculations maybe, or the mathematical equation of how much dignity costs per month. All of them running toward something, or away from something, usually both. The desert doesn't judge, it just witnesses, patient as a grave. Mile 147. We pass an exit for 3 points, population maybe 300 on a good day. A single streetlight illuminates a gas station closed for repairs, its windows boarded with plywood covered in sun-faded posters for missing pets and lost children. For 30 seconds, that station exists in our headlight beam, then disappears back into darkness, like it was never there at all. I think about the man again, walking into that same darkness. Did he plan it this way? The satchel, the mysterious delivery, the walk into nowhere? Or was it impulse, one final decision in a life stripped of choices? Either way, he's gone now, and I'm the custodian of whatever truth he couldn't carry anymore. Responsibility tastes like copper pennies and cold coffee. Every mile brings me closer to Tucson, closer to the moment when I'll have to decide whether to honor a dead man's request or turn this burden over to authorities who might bury it under procedure and politics. The satchel holds justice, he said. But whose justice? And what kind? The radio crackles with an emergency weather alert. Flash flood warning for southern Arizona. Monsoon season starting early, meteorologist explains, in the calm voice they reserve for disasters. I glance at the clear sky, stars sharp as broken glass, and wonder if nature is preparing its own judgment for whatever revelation waits inside that bag. Mile 134. Dawn threatens the eastern horizon with pale fingers that haven't yet committed to sunrise. The air inside the bus shifts as passengers sense the approaching day. Bodies stirring, dreams releasing their grip. The slow return to consciousness that feels like resurrection every morning. But some resurrections come with costs. I adjust my grip on the wheel and settle the satchel more securely in my lap. Whatever happens next, wherever this road leads, I'm committed now. The man who walked into darkness trusted me with his burden, and trust, real trust, is rarer than rain in August. I won't waste it on cowardice or second thoughts. The vigil continues. Outside, the desert holds its breath, waiting for dawn to reveal what darkness concealed. Inside, I carry forward one man's final act of love disguised as vengeance, hoping against hope that justice and mercy might find a way to coexist in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Sometimes the road chooses you instead of the other way around. Tonight, carrying this satchel toward whatever destination waits, I understand that some journeys begin the moment you stop running from them. The miles roll on, counting down toward revelation, and I drive deeper into a story that started long before I entered it and will continue long after I'm gone. That's the thing about justice. It has patience that outlasts individual lives, flowing like an underground river toward surfaces we might never see. Are you ready for what comes next? Because even now, telling you this story, I feel the weight of choices that can't be undone, and I need your company for what lies ahead in the darkness we're driving toward together. Tucson Terminal materializes like a mirage at 6:47 a.m., concrete and fluorescent salvation after 4 hours in the desert's confessional. Passengers disembark with a shuffling urgency of people grateful to escape the enclosed intimacy of shared breathing space. Teenage girl hurries past without eye contact, footsteps echoing hollow on platform concrete. Vet counts his bills 3 times, lips moving in silent calculation, then disappears toward a taxi that may or may not take him where he needs to go. Businesswoman checks her phone immediately and starts crying at whatever message awaited her return to connectivity. Normal endings to normal journeys for normal people. But I'm not normal anymore. The satchel has made me complicit in something larger than my job description. Transformation is subtle and irreversible as radiation exposure. I carry it to my personal truck with hands that shake despite my efforts at steadiness, feeling like a man transporting unstable explosives through a crowd of innocents. Desert Mail Services sits in a strip mall that's seen better decades, wedged between a check-cashing place and a quinceañera dress shop whose windows promise fairy tale transformations for the price of 3 months' rent. The kind of neighborhood where questions aren't asked and strangers mind their own business, precisely why James Caldwell chose it. But I can't make that delivery. Not yet. Not without knowing what I'm unleashing into the world. I drive to Rosita's Diner, an all-night sanctuary where coffee tastes like liquid desperation and pie carries the weight of broken dreams. Vinyl booths hold confessions better than most churches. Fluorescent lights buzz hymns to insomnia. The waitress, Maria, has kind eyes that have seen too much and hands that remember honest work. She glances at the satchel as I claim a corner booth. "That's beautiful leather," she observes, refilling coffee I haven't touched. "Looks like it has stories." "More than I want to know," I admit, and her wisdom recognizes that as a request for solitude. Alone with the satchel, I understand this moment is a threshold. Once opened, whatever's inside will become my responsibility, my burden, my choice to carry forward or abandon. But the weight of not knowing has become unbearable, heavier than any truth could be. The brass clasps release with whispers of protest, old mechanisms reluctant to surrender their secrets. Inside, Wrapped in white cloth, yellowed by age and something darker, lies a Bible. But not just any Bible. This one bears stains that make my stomach lurch. Dark brown splotches, some small as teardrops, others spreading across the leather cover like maps of violence. The metallic smell rises stronger now, unmistakable. Dried blood, lots of it, soaked into binding and pages until the holy book became a testament to something unholy. Beneath the Bible, a manila envelope thick with contents that crinkle under my touch. And at the bottom, wrapped separately in tissue paper, a single photograph of a girl who makes my heart stop. Dark hair, bright eyes, maybe 16, smiling at the camera with the kind of innocence that believes the world contains more good than evil. On the back, in careful handwriting, Sarah Marie Caldwell, born March 15th, 2006, died August 3rd, 2022. She trusted them. I stare at that photograph until the lines blur, memorizing every detail of a face that should have had decades of birthdays ahead of it. 16 years old, the same age Emma was when she stopped taking my calls, when adolescent anger calcified into permanent distance. The same age I was when I thought I understood what love meant, before life taught me that loving someone doesn't guarantee the power to protect them. The manila envelope contains horrors I wish I could unsee. Police reports that read like fiction too cruel for publication. Medical records detailing injuries that catalog human evil with clinical precision. Screenshots of text messages and emails that reveal predators speaking casually about their prey, discussing Sarah like she was merchandise rather than a human being with dreams and fears and a father who loved her enough to die for justice. But this isn't just documentation of one tragedy. These papers map a network. Names, dates, locations, financial transactions. A web of corruption that reaches into law enforcement, local government, business communities across 3 states. Someone had spent months, maybe years, building an airtight case against an organized ring of predators who had been operating with impunity, protected by money and influence, and the silence of victims too terrorized to speak. At the bottom of the envelope, a letter written on legal pad paper in the same careful script that identified Sarah in the photograph. Addressed to Detective Martinez, Tucson Police Department, it begins, "My name is James Caldwell, and my daughter Sarah was murdered by the people whose names and crimes are documented in this package." The letter unfolds across 6 pages of methodical fury, connecting Sarah's case to a dozen other young victims, building bridges between seemingly unrelated crimes until the pattern becomes undeniable. It's the work of a father who channeled grief into investigation, love into evidence, heartbreak into hope for justice that might save other children from Sarah's fate. The final paragraph destroys me. I won't be alive to see justice done, but I've made sure someone will deliver this evidence to you. By the time you read this, I'll be with Sarah. But these documents will speak for both of us and for all the other children who never got the chance to speak for themselves. I sit in that vinyl booth as dawnlight creeps through diner windows, understanding slowly that I'm no longer just a bus driver carrying passengers between disappointments. I've become the final link in a dead father's chain of justice, the bridge between evidence and revelation, between silence and truth. The coffee goes cold while I read every page, every report, every heartbreaking detail of Sarah's final weeks. The picture emerges of a vulnerable 16-year-old who fell prey to men who saw her as entertainment rather than a human being. Men who used their positions of power to silence investigations, intimidate witnesses, bury evidence under layers of bureaucracy and fear. But James Caldwell had been smarter than they anticipated. He documented everything, built connections they thought they'd hidden, gathered evidence they believed was destroyed. He turned his investigation into an obsession, his love for Sarah into a weapon sharp enough to cut through corruption that had seemed untouchable. Now that weapon sits in my hands, its edge honed by a dead man's determination and tempered in blood both literal and metaphorical. The question becomes, do I have the courage to wield it? Maria refills my coffee one more time, noticing the papers spread across the table. She doesn't read them. Privacy still means something in places like this. But her eyes catch the photograph of Sarah, and her expression softens with recognition that transcends language. She was beautiful, Maria whispers. She was 16, I reply, and Maria nods with the understanding of a mother who knows how precious and fragile 16 can be. I gather the papers, secure them in the envelope, wrap the bloody Bible back in its cloth shroud. The satchel accepts its burden once more, brass clasps clicking shut with finality that sounds like a coffin lid closing, but not ending, beginning. This isn't Sarah's burial. It's her resurrection into evidence that will speak for her louder than her silenced voice ever could. Outside, the sun climbs toward noon, casting hard shadows that reveal truth without mercy. I carry the satchel back to my truck, feeling its weight distribute differently now, not heavy with mystery, but dense with purpose, compact with the compressed matter of justice waiting to explode into light. The drive to Desert Mail Services takes 7 minutes. 7 minutes to decide whether I'm brave enough to honor a dead man's trust, whether I believe justice exists outside of courtrooms that can be bought and prosecutors who can be silenced. The strip mall parking lot stretches before me like a stage set for the final act of a play I never auditioned for, but somehow star in. Box 247 waits inside, an anonymous metal rectangle that will either become a tomb for evidence or a womb for justice. I sit in the truck cab, engine ticking as it cools, satchel on the seat beside me like a passenger who's traveled too far to turn back now. In my rearview mirror, I see 12 years of moral compromises, moments when I chose comfort over courage, silence over truth. All leading to this moment, this choice, this opportunity to be more than a witness to tragedy. The decision feels inevitable, like gravity pulling water downhill. I retrieve a priority mailbox from the postal machine, address it in block letters that disguise my handwriting. Detective Martinez, Tucson Police Department. For the return address, I write simply, "From Sarah, with love." Box 247 opens with a key I don't have, but the slot is large enough for the package. The sound it makes hitting the bottom, a soft thump like a heart beginning to beat, echoes in the narrow space between metal walls. I close the slot, hearing the internal lock engage, and walk away knowing I've just changed the trajectory of multiple lives, perhaps including my own. The drive back toward Phoenix should feel like escape, but instead it feels like entering a labyrinth where every turn reveals new moral complexities. My hands grip the wheel with unnecessary force, knuckles white as highway lines, while my mind cycles through consequences I can't predict or control. What have I done? Delivered justice or unleashed chaos? Honored a dead father's love or enabled someone's revenge fantasy? The questions multiply like cancer cells, each one spawning doubts that metastasize through my careful cynicism. Mile 134. I think about Detective Martinez opening that package, seeing Sarah's photograph, reading her father's methodical documentation of evil. Will he pursue the evidence or bury it like previous investigations James Caldwell mentioned? Oh. The letter suggested other attempts at justice had been buried under procedure and politics, which means this Detective Martinez either has the integrity to act or the wisdom to stay silent. Mile 147. Radio reports flash flood warnings for Pima County. Storm clouds gather on the horizon like an army of conscience, dark and promising. Maybe nature's preparing its own judgment for whatever I've set in motion. The desert doesn't tolerate lies, and truth has a way of surfacing here like bones bleached clean by sun and time. My truck cab feels smaller now, compressed by the weight of decision made and deed done. The absence of the satchel creates negative space that echoes louder than its presence ever did. I reach unconsciously for where it sat, fingers finding empty vinyl, and realize I've developed phantom limb syndrome for someone else's burden. Mile 159. I pass the 3 Points exit again, that solitary gas station still closed for repairs, still bearing its sun-faded posters of missing children. How many Sarah Caldwells disappear into systems designed to protect power rather than innocence? How many James Caldwells die carrying evidence that never reaches the light? The questions feel personal now, weighted with complicity. I'm no longer an observer of other people's tragedies, but a participant in the machinery of justice, however imperfect. The realization sits uncomfortable as a pebble in my shoe, impossible to ignore. My phone buzzes. Text from dispatch about tomorrow's schedule. Phoenix to Tucson. Same route. Same time. Different passengers carrying different sorrows, but the highway remains constant, patient as a confessor who's heard every possible sin. Will I drive that route differently now, knowing what I've done? Will every passenger with a bag trigger memories of James Caldwell and his bloody Bible? Mile 176. The spot where he got off the bus. I slow unconsciously, scanning the roadside for signs of what happened next. Did he walk until exhaustion took him? Find shelter in an abandoned building? Or did he simply sit down in the darkness and wait for peace to arrive on its own schedule? No evidence remains. The desert keeps its secrets, and James Caldwell has become one of them, a ghost who trusted a stranger with his final act of love disguised as justice. I think about my own daughter, Emma, building a life I'll never see. What would I do if someone hurt her? How far would I go to ensure justice when official channels failed? The thought experiment leads to dark places, scenarios where my own moral certainty crumbles under the pressure of protective love. Maybe that's what James Caldwell understood, that sometimes justice requires ordinary people to make extraordinary choices, to step outside the safety of legal systems that can be corrupted or circumvented. Maybe he knew that love strong enough to map corruption and document evil would eventually find its way to someone willing to act. Mile 189. The shooting star site. I glance up reflexively, but daylight has erased the stars, replaced them with blue sky that promises heat and clarity in equal measure. The cosmic perspective seems less comforting now. Those stars witnessed whatever happened to Sarah, watched her father plan his methodical campaign for justice, observed my moment of decision in a strip mall parking lot. They'll still be burning long after everyone involved in this story has become dust. But human justice operates on human timescales. measured in heartbeats and legal procedures, and the courage of individuals who choose action over comfort. My truck's air conditioning battles the rising heat, mechanical persistence against natural forces, like the struggle between corruption and justice, each side possessing its own advantages. Corruption has money, influence, the ability to silence witnesses and bury evidence. Justice has documentation, determination, and occasionally the right person in the right place at the right moment. I've become that person, whether I wanted to or not. The highway stretches ahead like a timeline, past flowing toward future without pause for moral reflection. But I'm changed now, marked by the trust a dying man placed in a stranger. The weight of that responsibility will travel with me on every route, every passenger a potential bearer of secrets too heavy for one person to carry alone. Phoenix appears on the horizon like a mirage of concrete and regret, heat waves making the city shimmer with uncertainty. I'll return to my apartment, try to sleep, wake up tomorrow, and drive the same route that transformed me from observer to participant. But the transformation is permanent, irreversible as radiation exposure. I've delivered justice or vengeance or hope. Time will determine which one, but the choice has been made and cannot be unmade. James Caldwell trusted me with his daughter's story, and I've passed it forward to someone with the power to act. Whether Detective Martinez proves worthy of that trust remains to be seen. The phone buzzes again. News alert. I ignore it. Whatever's happening in the world can wait until I've processed what I've done, until I've made peace with the possibility that I've either saved lives or endangered them. That's the burden of moral action in an immoral world. You never know the full consequences until they've already begun to unfold, rippling outward from a single decision like waves from a stone thrown into still water. I drive toward Phoenix, carrying the memory of Sarah's photograph, her father's love, and the weight of justice delivered into uncertain hands. The desert watches, patient and impartial, as another story adds itself to the collection of secrets buried in sand and stars. 3 weeks, 2 days, 14 hours. That's how long it took for the echo to begin. I was loading passengers at the Phoenix terminal when the news ticker scrolled across the waiting room television. Multi-state human trafficking ring, dismantled in coordinated federal operation. The words crawled past, like a slow-motion explosion, each letter carrying the weight of vindication and fear in equal measure. By the time I reached mile marker 189, the shooting star site, radio stations had picked up the story. 7 arrests across Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. Federal agents, state police, local law enforcement moving in synchronized precision against targets who thought themselves untouchable. The scope of the operation suggested months of planning, the kind of careful investigation that builds cases strong enough to survive expensive lawyers and political pressure. They mentioned Detective Elena Martinez, not the Detective Martinez from James Caldwell's letter, but his daughter, a federal prosecutor who had been building the case for 8 months. The irony tasted like copper pennies in vindication. A daughter delivering justice for another father's daughter, the wheel of karma grinding slow but inexorable. The details emerged over days like photographs developing in chemical baths, financial records showing payment to silence victims, communication logs revealing a network that operated with corporate efficiency, physical evidence that painted pictures of exploitation too systematic to dismiss as isolated incidents, and at the center, Sarah Marie Caldwell's case, the keystone that held the entire prosecution together. I drove my routes, carried my passengers, listened to the story unfold across AM radio stations that usually trafficked in sports scores and weather reports. Business executives, city officials, police officers, people who'd hidden behind badges and titles while preying on the vulnerable, marched into courtrooms wearing handcuffs and expressions of disbelief. The trials took 7 months. I followed every development obsessively, buying newspapers I'd never read before, streaming legal coverage on my phone during breaks. Prosecutor Elena Martinez built her cases with surgical precision, each piece of evidence fitting together like a puzzle that revealed the full picture of systematic evil. She never mentioned mysterious packages or dead fathers seeking posthumous justice. The evidence had appeared through ongoing investigation and confidential sources, bureaucratic language that protected the chain of custody while honoring the truth that justice sometimes arrives through unconventional channels. 7 convictions, sentences ranging from 25 years to life without parole, asset forfeiture that stripped millions from accounts that had been fattened by other people's pain. And somewhere in the legal machinery grinding toward resolution, James Caldwell's love for his daughter transformed into protection for children he would never meet. But the echo didn't end with convictions. 6 months later, I found a newspaper folded on my driver's seat. Article on page 8 about a victim advocacy foundation established with proceeds from the asset forfeiture. The Sarah Caldwell Foundation, dedicated to educating communities about trafficking warning signs and supporting survivors who'd found the courage to speak. The photograph accompanying the article showed the same bright eyes and innocent smile from the satchel. But now the caption read, Sarah Marie Caldwell, whose memory continues to protect vulnerable youth through education and advocacy programs funded by her foundation. I sat in that driver's seat for 30 minutes, studying the photograph that had become a symbol of justice achieved through love that transcended death. James Caldwell hadn't lived to see his daughter's killers convicted, but his methodical documentation of evil had transformed grief into protection for other people's children. The Foundation's first program, training for bus drivers, taxi operators, hotel staff, people who encounter potential trafficking victims but might not recognize the signs. Transportation professionals often have the first opportunity to identify victims, the article explained. This program empowers them to act as first responders in the fight against human trafficking. My throat tightened as I read that section, understanding that James Caldwell's trust in a bus driver had rippled outward to protect other travelers, other children, other families that might otherwise face Sarah's fate. The man who handed me a bloody Bible in the desert darkness had somehow anticipated this moment, this expansion of protection beyond his individual case. 12 months after the package delivery, I received an unexpected call. Detective Elena Martinez, the prosecutor who'd built the case, asking to meet for coffee. She'd tracked me down through employment records, wanting to thank the anonymous citizen who'd provided crucial evidence that broke the case open. We met at Rosita's Diner, same booth where I'd first opened the satchel. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. Over coffee that tasted like redemption, she told me about the phone call that had changed everything. Someone called my father's direct line, left a message about evidence in Box 247 at Desert Mail Services. Wouldn't leave a name, just said it was from Sarah, with love. My father was skeptical. He'd seen too many false leads, but he checked it anyway. She stirred sugar into her coffee with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to building cases from scattered evidence. The package contained the most comprehensive documentation of organized crime I've ever seen. Whoever assembled it understood law enforcement procedures, knew exactly what we'd need to build prosecutable cases. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. Must have been someone with police experience, or someone who loved a victim enough to become an expert. She met my eyes across the table, and I saw recognition there, not of my identity, but of the love that drives ordinary people to extraordinary acts. The handwriting analysis suggested someone under extreme emotional stress. The level of detail indicated months of investigation, and the care taken to protect evidence integrity showed someone who understood how easily cases can be dismissed on technicalities. She reached into her briefcase, withdrew a familiar photograph. Sarah Marie Caldwell, bright eyes and innocent smile, looking directly at the camera with trust that should have been justified. This picture was pinned to the front of the documentation. Whoever assembled the evidence wanted us to remember that we weren't just pursuing convictions, we were seeking justice for a specific person who deserved better than she received. I stared at the photograph, remembering the weight of it in my hands, the careful script identifying Sarah and documenting her trust. Did you ever find out who put the package together? Elena's smile carried sadness and gratitude in equal measure. We had theories. Records showed a James Caldwell filing multiple complaints about his daughter's case, complaints that were buried under procedural excuses and jurisdictional disputes. He disappeared around the time the evidence was delivered, never to be seen again. She tucked the photograph back into her briefcase with reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. I like to think he's with Sarah now, knowing that her death wasn't meaningless. The foundation bearing her name has already prevented dozens of other children from falling prey to the network that killed her. That's justice that transcends any individual case. As she prepared to leave, Elena placed a business card on the table. If you ever encounter someone carrying evidence too dangerous for them to deliver personally, my direct number is on the back. Sometimes, justice requires people to step outside official channels, to trust strangers with burdens too heavy for one person to carry. She paused at the diner door, looking back with eyes that held the weight of cases solved and victims vindicated. Thank you for whatever role you played in this. Sarah's father chose his messenger wisely. After she left, I sat in the booth until sunset, thinking about chain reactions and moral responsibility and the way love can transform grief into protection for people you'll never meet. James Caldwell had walked into desert darkness carrying evidence that would save other children from his daughter's fate. He'd trusted a stranger with that evidence, and that stranger had chosen courage over comfort, action over apathy. The echo continues to expand. Every month, the Foundation publishes statistics. Trafficking rings disrupted, victims identified and rescued, communities educated about warning signs. Sarah's death had become a catalyst for protection that ripples outward like waves from a stone thrown into still water, touching shores her father never imagined. I still drive the Phoenix to Tucson route, still carry passengers fleeing disappointment or chasing hope. But now I watch them differently, alert for signs of distress that might indicate something more serious than ordinary sorrow. The Foundation training has taught me to recognize trafficking victims, to spot the subtle signals of people trapped in situations they can't escape without help. 3 times in the past year, I've made phone calls that led to investigations. A teenage girl with bruises that told stories her silence couldn't. A young man whose fear seemed disproportionate to normal travel anxiety. A woman whose emotional responses suggested trauma beyond typical domestic discord. Each call connects me to Elena Martinez's office, where victim advocates trained by Sarah's foundation coordinate with law enforcement to provide help instead of judgment, protection instead of prosecution. The network James Caldwell exposed has been replaced by a network of protection, justice growing from the soil of love and sacrifice. The desert still looks like a graveyard of ambitions at 3 a.m., but now I see something else in the darkness. I see the stars Sarah's father wished upon, the hope that justice might outlive the people who seek it, the possibility that ordinary individuals can choose to be extraordinary when circumstances demand courage. That's what I learned from the man who handed me a Bible soaked in blood. That sometimes the most important deliveries are the ones we never plan to make, and the difference between tragedy and justice can be as simple as one person deciding to care about another person's story enough to act. Sarah Marie Caldwell would be 20 now, old enough to vote, fall in love, make mistakes, and learn from them, build a life of her own choosing. She'll never get that chance. But because her father loved her enough to document the darkness that killed her, other children will have opportunities she was denied. That's not redemption. Nothing can restore Sarah's stolen years or heal the wound her death carved in the world. But it's something. It's justice that grows in the space between heartbeats, protection that spreads like dawn across desert landscapes, love that transforms itself into action when action becomes the only remaining expression of caring. The echo of justice travels at the speed of moral courage from one broken heart to another, gathering strength as it moves, becoming larger than any individual story while never forgetting the specific faces that launched it into the world. Tonight, driving through darkness with new passengers carrying their own burdens, I listened for that echo in the engine's rhythm and the road's whispered promises. Somewhere in the distance, Sarah Caldwell's memory continues to protect children her father will never meet, and that protection grows stronger with every person willing to carry forward the burden of caring for strangers. Thank you for traveling with me through this darkness. Every comment you leave is like a light in a house by the roadside, reminding me that we're not alone in the silence. If you want to hear where the road takes me next, subscribe and join me for these journeys into the stories that make us human. Sometimes the most important trips are the ones we take together, carrying each other's burdens until they become light enough to bear.